If you look at UGC has now said there is no differentiation between an online degree and a physical degree. क्षमा कहे परवाने से परे चले जा मेरी तरह जल जाएगा यहाँ मत आ, बट वो नहीं सुनता है क्योंकि उसको जल जाना होता है, right?
So what is the UPI or WhatsApp or Geo moment for EdTech on the institution side?
This market don't go and sell, because anything when in education, when you are trying to sell, people look at you with suspicion. Right? Now NEP is allowing multi-entry exit. I can actually leave an institution at first year and go to another in the second year. That always happened in US and Australia, right?
What is the Digii offering or the Digii product? What does it do? What problems does it solve?
So Digii is enterprise SaaS, or it's literally the operating system for institutions in higher education. कोशिश भी कर, उम्मीद भी रख, रास्ता भी चुन, उसके बाद जाकर थोड़ा मुकद्दर तलाश कर.
Welcome to the Prime Venture Partners podcast. This is your host, Amit Somani, and I am delighted to have with us today Hemant Sahal, founder and CEO of Digii. Welcome to the show, Hemant.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for having me here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Hemant, the company Digii was earlier called Callpal, and you've been at it for many, many years. Maybe you can take our listeners and viewers through the journey of both your journey and that of the early days of Callpal, now Digii.
Yeah, great. So I think I have a real answer and a right answer. I'll try to mix both of them to give the best answer for this. And very simply put, like education, if you see, is one of the most impactful and the largest services in the world, among the top three, religion and healthcare being the other two. And today, whatever we talk about EdTech, still if you see, almost 99% of education around the world is still being delivered or imparted by the education institutions. And these institutions are as complex as enterprises and companies, but unfortunately they don't have software or technology that's purposely built for them. And that prompted us to start Digii, where we said, look, we need to build enterprise software that education deserves. And that's where we are today. We work with about 160 plus institutions. And the personal connect to this is that I started my first company back in 2009 when I was still at college. And right after that, I also taught in a few courses at schools and education institutions. So I had also an experience of being a teacher. And later we started Adhyanta School for Leadership and Innovation in Delhi, and I was one of the founding directors. And I also had a first-hand experience of running an institution. So that whole experience of a student teaching and administration actually gave me that whole exposure, saying that, look, we're actually bringing multiple things together. And it's like a jugaad version of tech that we're leveraging. And hence, that was also first-hand friction and that whole bad experience that I experienced myself that prompted me to start the organization.
So Hemant, this is fascinating. I never knew that you taught at a school, even though we've been working together and an institution. We've been working together for several years. So the question for you is, what triggered this, entrepreneurship thought in you that early, back even in college at VIT? Because I'm sure there are many of our viewers and listeners who are young, either entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs. So can you talk to us a little bit about the early triggers, or maybe even some stuff about your childhood or your family, if there were any triggers there?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think I'm somebody who's very fond of cooking, and I'll probably bring a story from there. Is like when you're really hungry, you don't literally think of which dish you want to eat, right? You just want to go and eat something that is good, and it should sort of take care of your hunger. And I think something similar happened when we started Callpal, that I was very passionate. I said, look, we need to build some great tech for institutions. And first thing that we found was that most of the stakeholders were disconnected, and the way we were leveraging technology personally in our lives, whether it was WhatsApp and other, we were not leveraging that in institutions. So that's the birth of Callpal, which stood for collaboration and polling. We said, look, there need to be a platform where all the key stakeholders can chit chat, broadcast information, stay more informed, and take better decisions. And that started the journey of Callpal. And in that journey, we realized institutions loved it. They said, hey, we love the user experience. We love the mobile first experience. And they said, hey, but can't you do fees for me? Can't you also help me with admissions? And being like the product purist initially said, hey, distraction. No, we will do what we are doing. We'll do the best thing possible. But then there was a moment of epiphany for us over a period of time, where we realized, look, there's a bigger fundamental problem, right? And we're trying to sell gulab jamun in a market where people are hungry and they want the base first. And hence we said, go back, build the full operating system and deliver a bigger and a stronger value to institutions. And then obviously what we originally were doing will be more relevant. And hence the birth of Digii.
Fantastic. Although I'm sure people who are hungry might even eat a gulab jamun, at least some of them. I remember seeing a Swiggy commercial on that. But let's move along. We'll come back to the Digii story and the evolution of, and the adoption of software in educational institutions later. But I know you have a very strong view on what kind of entrepreneurship there should be, right? Which is to say that it could be either a very missionary entrepreneur. Obviously, an entrepreneur is trying to build up some thing of commercial value. Or there could be somebody who's just going after a commercial opportunity, saying, there's a gap here and I'll go fill this gap and, we'll create value for everybody, right? So can you talk a little bit about this notion of, where you think Digii is, where you are, and why that is important to you or for any entrepreneur that's listening to this and thinking about starting up?
Yeah. So I think, it's something personally and I look at this problem in an extremely personal way in terms of that I really want to solve this problem at scale. And hence everything that comes along with is we are not looking at it from the lens of opportunity or anything else, but saying, look, this problem needs to be solved at scale. And then one of the things though I'm bad at singing, and I think there's a whole beautiful song if you have heard, which is प्यार दीवाना होता है. And the lines in that is कि क्षमा कहे परवाने से परे चले जा, यहाँ मेरी तरह जल जाएगा, यहाँ मता. But वो नहीं सुनता है क्योंकि उसको जल जाना होता है, right? And that's the whole story of why do we say parwana, right? So I think missionary entrepreneurs are like parwana. They want to find that roshni and they want to stay with it. And for us, this problem is very, very important. We believe education, people who are educated and not educated, there is a huge difference in the quality of their lives, their families, and even people around them. So education is the best gift anybody can get. And if institutions are the ones who are going to give that gift, we need to really be building something that will help them do it better, at better scale, better quality. And that's the mission that has always been driving us. And every single decision we are making at Digii, that is the fundamental thing that we are always thinking.
Fantastic, Hemant. In fact, when a lot of people who are in mid-career or in existing companies, startups, or even larger companies come to us saying, I want to start up, we often ask them, hey, what is the problem that has grabbed you that you're not able to sleep because of, right? That's got you awake every day, every night. Forget whether it has got TAM, SHAM, forget whether you'll get VCs, forget whether you'll get co-founders. You just can't sleep. This is all you can think about. And when you find a problem like that, of course, eventually you do have to pitch to VCs like us and others. So you do have to see, is this possible for it to be a viable commercial venture? But if you don't have a problem that grabs you, to use your term, then it's going to be very difficult and a long, tough road ahead. So I completely agree that we want more missionary entrepreneurs who will bring things of value, but not necessarily just people doing it just because they see a gap in the ecosystem. Great. So Hemant, we'll move along and talk a little bit about just the overall state of affairs in the education market in India. And you're technically, in my opinion, not really EdTech, right? You're really a software company selling to education institutions. So talk to us about the state of the education institutions. How many are there? What are some of their challenges? How India's, Prime Minister Modi keeps talking about our big demographic dividend, the youngest youthful population in the world. How are these institutions doing overall in terms of providing education for our future leaders?
Absolutely. So see, India has roughly around 50,000 plus institutions. The few ways to look at these institutions is, one, there are institutions which are run by the government. And then there are institutions which are run privately by non-government organizations, trusts, or individuals. The other is to look at that there are universities which are able to run the whole show on their own terms. And within the universities, we have government universities, we have deemed to be universities, and we have got state private universities. And on the other hand, we have institutions which are affiliated to a state government university, which is the largest, I would say, number. And then there are a few institutions which are autonomous, where they have performed well enough, where they are given the autonomy to be on their own. Now, like I said, affiliated institutions are the largest, but one of the things that is happening in India is that there is a huge undercurrent which may not be as visible today, which is three things. First, the quality of higher ed institutions are increasing rapidly. If you look at the last few years, there is almost double the number of state private universities that were there in India. Which means, and any new university coming up is actually coming up in the top-notch quality. They are looking at multidisciplinarity, and the quality of education is fundamentally far better than what is earlier. Second, NEP is recommending that in the long term, there will be no affiliated institutions, right? So that the largest number of institutions we have today will fundamentally change because there will be no affiliated institution. So you will either be autonomous or you will be a university. And hence people are, if you look at, there is a huge shift in terms of institutions looking at themselves saying, I need to either become a university or autonomous in the next few years. That's fundamentally also changing the whole landscape in institutions. So, and we are roughly at only 30% of the gross enrollment ratio, which is the percentage of the people who are in institutions versus that should have been there. And India is aiming to get to at least 50 to 100%. That's like, that will also again see a huge increase in the number of institutions we have. So we are looking at a lot more universities and autonomous institutions in the next few years.
So can you quantify that a bit, Hemant, in terms of, are we talking of thousands of universities or institutions or tens of thousands of them? Where are we at now, and what do you conjecture will happen in the future?
So there are 1,000 plus universities today, and what will happen is universities are also scaling faster, right? So some of the best universities we work with are growing at almost like 25% to 50% in terms of their enrollment year on year, which is crazy, right? Even from the corporate or a startup world. Some of these the institutions are growing at a pace which is, in fact, a startup like us will be also envious of kind of growth, right? And the second thing that's happening here is also the new institutions, right? So I see, and I don't have really a number to it, but I absolutely see that they will be growing anywhere like 25 to 30% in terms of the number of universities year in a year. But a lot of autonomous institutions or affiliated will become universities. So in my view, personally, in the next few years, we should at least be seeing 3,000 to 4,000 universities in India.
Fantastic. Now let's talk about, the problem statement that you're addressing, but you obviously see a lot of things there. How do these universities run in terms of their actual back-end infrastructure? Yes, there's the education and the content and the, the professors and the lecturers and so forth. But what is the student experience like? What is the administrative experience like, etc.? How open are they to adopting technology? How open are they to modernizing their experience, the customer experience? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. So
there are, I think, 4 factors that I want to talk about, which has fundamentally changed the whole higher education landscape, right? The first is, if you see any market or any space where there is more demand than the supply, anything works, right? And that was the case in education earlier, right? The number of students aspiring to get into good institutions versus the number of institutions available was lopsided, right? Hence, whatever the institution was offering in whatever form, there was enough demand for it. And that's when markets or any organizations get lazy, right? But what 4 things have changed fundamentally, which is driving this whole transformation in higher education, is first, I would say, is that whole competition. With this whole new set of universities and institutions coming up, there is far more competition. And let's look at the last few years. We have some of the best universities in the country, like there's Ashoka in Bangalore. There's recently Chanakya University started. And there's Apollo, for example. A lot of corporates have started universities, like there's a Geo Institute, there's an Apollo University. All these are top-notch institutions. And whenever the market competition increases, people have to rethink the way they were, right? So that's the first driver of transformation. The second is also the customer, right? Which is the student here. Students are personally highly empowered digitally in their lives. They're using Instagram to, WhatsApp to so many tools. Everything they are literally able to do it at the fingertips, right? But if that is not the experience at the institutions, there is going to be a huge dissonance, right? And that's also forcing again institutions to bring in more digital transformation. Third is compliance. There is large percentage of institutions in India are not yet accredited, right? And there's a huge push from the government where most of the grants and the government schemes are now connected to accreditation. For example, if you want to launch online programs and degrees, you can't do it unless you have a NAC A+ accreditation, right? Or if you're not in the top 100 of the NIRF. So that huge push, and whenever you want to go accredited, there has to be a certain governance, a certain structure and foundation in place. And that's a third big push that's actually bringing in this change in the institutions.
You said there were 4. Is there a fourth one?
So the fourth one, so we talked about competition, we talked about customer experience, and we talked about compliance, right? And the fourth one is also COVID. That's like the fourth C, I would say, right? So sometimes we all need that, like, in Hindi we say, there is every Hanuman needs a Jamvant, right? Somebody needs to come and tell you, boss, you can do more, right? And I think first COVID came as a shock to institutions, but then institutions realizing that, look, we can literally do so much more. So it became an opportunity for them. And hence post-COVID, all these guys have like literally at 2 times or 3 times where they were. And COVID also pushed and brought that sort of, visibility in terms of what they could have done with digital transformation.
Fantastic, Hemant. Very exciting to hear that people, in institutions and colleges and universities are thinking about customer experience, not just about, of course, compliance they have to do. Can you talk about a little bit about NEP and what is the government's role in all of this in terms of driving both this digital adoption as well as just up-leveling the infrastructure so our students and our younger generation can get a great quality of education? And what is real? I mean, I know the government's put out this NEP 2020, but what's real? What is getting adopted in practice? What are people excited about implementing on the field?
Yeah. So 2 very interesting facts about NEP is first, this is a long due, I would say, a policy that was in terms of education, because I think it was decades back we had a policy at scale that came in education, and we were literally dragging our feet on the same policies that existed. And second is NEP is so broad, and I think it's also a little abstract, which is the right thing, because it leaves a lot of thinking and execution at the institution level. Which is great, because that's where the good to great differentiation happens, right? The great institutions will actually leverage it to the best. A lot of will keep thinking and follow the others, right? So with the NEP, few things that I see very exciting. One, it brings in that flexibility in education. And again, I'll bring the cooking example there, right? Like my masala tea could be very different than Amit's masala tea, right?
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Somebody might want more cardamom than the ginger, right? And otherwise. And in fact, me and my wife have never been able to arrive at the common ground in terms of how the masala tea should be, right? So what happens same in education? The way I would want my engineering education could be fundamentally different than the other student. And that's what NEP is going to allow, right? What education has 2 sides. One is the internal or inner growth of the student. Second is the career side, right? Now, with the complexity of the careers today, education institutions have to respond to it. But they were not able to do it in a fixed structure. With the NEP, the flexibility in curriculum where I could actually get interdisciplinary education, where I could actually be studying mechanical engineering along with life sciences together, and that might end up forming a great career for me. That's one big change. The flexibility in education, where personalization would happen, right? And people will be, and that's better for the industry as well, because they'll get far better sort of employable and ready workforce from there. Second great thing is it gives you the flex. It brings it. See, what happened earlier in India is if you get into first year in a college, you're stuck for the next 4 years, right? So in a way, again, an option for institutions to be sort of a little complacent that, acha, student is here, right? Now NEP is allowing multi-entry exit. I can actually leave an institution at first year and go to another in the second year. That always happened in US and Australia, right? So now the pressure on institutions to say, look, I need to be on the top of my game, because otherwise students are going to get pulled in. I think short term it will have an impact. Institutions will be sort of facing the heat for this, but in the long term it's great for the student, because again the focus will go back on the student. And the third thing, then the last thing which I think NEP is like bringing great is like I said, we are going away slowly from that whole affiliated institution model where it was purely an execution place. Somebody else was dictating and telling you what to do, which was great at some point in India where you wanted to maintain quality and right. But now we are saying that, look, institutions need to be autonomous and independent, and we should get away from this whole affiliated institution, which is also going to be big.
Fantastic. So, in the line of work that I am in, which is venture capital, we often think about defining moments that change the trajectory of a market. Right. So, for example, Jio bringing mobile data to be that cost, unleashed the entire mobile internet revolution here. Nandan Nilekani has given this nice talk about, what's the WhatsApp moment for fintech, which is, of course, partly demonetization, partly UPI, partly COVID. So what is the UPI or WhatsApp or Geo moment for EdTech on the institution side, right? What do you think will take everybody and get them a great experience, much like you would on a consumer app, whether you're buying food or going to a movie or doing e-commerce shopping? So what are the triggers that'll get us there in your opinion?
Yeah, no, this is the most exciting thing. I think education is little late to the party, but that's going to happen now, right? And few things I see is that if you look at UGC has now said there is no differentiation between an online degree and a physical degree. So the degree you get, nobody will be able to tell whether you got it online or you got it in fact, they call the existing degree model as a conventional degree, which is a subtle, in a way, hint also. And the new online degrees are like the probably considered. So that's one of the big changes, because what's going to happen whenever there are universities, and I'll not name, right? I know who have got like 10-15,000 students over 7-8 years of their existence. And they started their online programs and literally have like 20,000 plus students within 1 to 2 years. Now look at the dynamics here, right? And there is a student who's actually sitting in Alwar or sitting in Kochi or sitting somewhere else who's getting the quality education what they wanted. At home doing other things, they might be taking care of the parents, or they might be taking care of the family business, or they might be doing a job parallelly. So that's one big thing that I feel is where it's fundamentally changing the way education was earlier, right? Which was saying you study 12th class, then you go 4 years in the college, and then you go, right? That's one. Second thing, there's industry immersion happening, right? So industry is collaborating at a deeper level, and hence you see there are so many corporates which are jointly offering programs to students, which is you're actually very clear. And that's what Germany model is, right? Students are actually very specifically looking at skill set which are required eventually for the
vocational
in nature, right? So that's also great, because the model, for a larger set of students, the value of the education is that they need to get a job at the end of the day, right? That's the second thing. Third, like I said, the differentiation, the line between an EdTech and institutions is slowly going to change. Because institutions are also now, look at some of the best institutions, they are also started behaving like EdTechs. They're talking about bottom line, top line. They're talking about the student experience. They're talking about, what is the demand, right? They're looking at everything from that lens of, in a data-driven way. Institutions were largely wisdom-driven earlier, few people. There's a huge influx of top talent. There are a lot of top CXOs leaving corporate world and actually becoming CXOs at institutions. So eventually from a UPI moment, I feel when institutions will almost behave like enterprises in the right way, positive way, not saying they will look at profit, but like that's because I think profit and all these are a taboo words in education, despite that fundamentally everybody still looks at them, right? But I think the UPI moment will be where institutions will become as complex, and which they are, but they will become as,
effective,
efficient, right, as enterprises. And that will, in my opinion, change the game.
Absolutely. Great. So let's move along from that very, very nice sort of overview on what the challenges are, what the readiness is. Actually, maybe just one last question on the overall thing. Are people actually ready to, invest in technology and pay for technology, and, people like you don't have to struggle to collect money from them? Because even when we were investing in Digii, then Paul, this was a question that a lot of people are saying, will people even pay for this? Yeah, this is all fine and dandy. This will help them, but will they do it? So what has the experience been? And I'm hoping it has changed for the positive, but love to hear your thoughts on that.
So it's surprising how misunderstood this space is, I would say, and no disregard, but fundamentally, I think how VCs they have a big, I would say, misunderstanding of the space, right? I think this is almost equivalent to the same how any enterprise SaaS works, right? The customer profile is the same. The way you get onboarding and customer success is the same. Everything is literally the same, right? In terms of, so today we work with almost 160 plus institutions. This includes some of the best institutions like IIT Madras, National Law School, Bangalore, right? And also a lot of the top private institutions like Geo Institute, Apollo University, and the others, right? Now, what are the key challenges? Same, like how any enterprise has. Onboarding is a challenge. Change management is a challenge, right? Change in processes is a challenge, right? Probably when you're looking at a large enterprise software, decision making at the institution level is a challenge. Just like if you go to a large enterprise and say, we want to bring an HRMS to you, same decision making process, right? So I think it's exactly the same. But the good part here is, unlike the others, right? Other spaces or enterprise, in this SaaS, the difference, and the best example I can give you is if you go to the US and you look at their tube, like, their metros, right? They had metros like decades ahead, right? So they're now to move to the best of and look at the Bangalore or Delhi metros. You have like the best of the tech, best of the experience, because we're nothing. So we could get the best. And that's the moment in India in terms of the SaaS here, right? Institutions literally are running on fumes. They have literally nothing. So their ability to straight away jump to the modern top tech, which is mobile first, cloud native, looking at the user experience, is like that capability is very high, because they can straight away jump to the stuff. And hence the India opportunity is so large here that almost every institution, regardless of how big they are or what they are teaching, everybody is jumping onto tech. And obviously probably we can talk about more what does tech mean for institutions in probably subsequently. But it's fundamentally every institution is jumping in tech, probably in different ways, in different shapes and forms. But like I said, this SaaS is almost like the same as any other.
Understood. No, fantastic. Actually, this is a good time to jump into what these institutions are looking at in terms of tech. So clearly there's one track, which is to say we want to get towards, NEP, accreditation, etc., etc. But the other track is also which of these guys are leveraging this to provide an innovative experience, or which of these are leveraging this to improve their cost structure or their profitability.
So see, the motivation is, I think partially I answered that earlier, right? So there are institutions who are saying, I want to give the best student experience at my institution. The institution saying, hey, look, I need to bring in more administrative efficiency, because one of the things that has happened in the US is, as you see, there is huge student debt. The cost of education is continuously increasing, and institutions are conscious of actually looking at how their cost of education is. So they want to make sure that they're administratively very efficient. Third, there is also compliance. Like I said, there is no way you can deal with. Fourth is like with the NEP and others, the level of complexity at institutions is actually gone beyond the manual labor threshold. You just can't say I can put 5 more people and do the same job. They can't do it. So tech is fundamentally required to deal with a lot of processes which will not be possible.
Great. Hemant, this is a very good segue into Digii. And what is the Digii offering or the Digii product? What does it do? What problems does it solve? Maybe you can describe that for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah. So Digii is enterprise SaaS, or it's literally the operating system for institutions in higher education. We provide technology in fundamentally three areas. First is the administration, which are things like admissions, finance, HR, asset, infrastructure, your hostels and other areas where all the administrative functions get digitized. The second is the learning, where right from the academic orchestration of course registration, timetabling, scheduling, attendance, to their whole learning processes, content management, assessments, and also the examination process, which is very sacrosanct, like in terms of how do you conduct examinations, evaluate, generation of grades, transcripts, all of that forms the part of the learning stack. And the third is the experience stack, which is not just for students, but literally every stakeholder in the institution, where we have parents, everybody a part of it, which is how do you digitize smaller workflows, like getting a gate pass approval, to students knowing what is in the canteen today and, eating it on time, to things like engagement, where you are able to have a internal social network of the institution where everybody is equally informed and engaged, to things like how do you digitize the security of this. So all that forms a part of the experience stack. Now, all these three stacks, we look at technology in three ways. We provide them a system of record, which is traditionally the ERP, that's saying, okay, what I was doing on registers or in emails, I got to get all this data organized in a system. And which is obviously, in other industry, it's a decade old or probably a couple of decades old thing, right? The second is a system of engagement, where we are saying, look, the data should not come as a part of a job separately, where I'm entering the data and then I'm getting my reports. What if we were to really bring technology on their everyday life and whatever activities they are doing regularly, how is it assisted by technology regularly, where the data is just coming as a part of the regular things that you're doing? Like as a teaching, like as a teacher, if I'm actually sharing my content digitally through the platform, then I don't need to do half of the things separately from a system of record perspective. And we think if you are able to achieve the system of record and engagement, then there's so much of data footprint into the system that you can build a system of intelligence. where a teacher has very quick analytics about how my class is progressing. An administrator has better handle on terms of how my collection is going, how should I plan my cash flows. You have a better understanding of the utilization of the infrastructure, because that's the largest cost for them, saying, hey, am I utilizing my infrastructure better? How many more students can I take before I have to build my next building, right? So that system of intelligence software. So the administration, learning and experience, and within each one of them, there is sort of a system of record, system of engagement and intelligence. And that's what I was saying. There are different institutions at different sort of phases of digital transformation, where they will take parts of it based on where they are and eventually keep scaling up.
Great, Hemant. So I think beautiful product, system of record, system of engagement, leading to a system of intelligence. How do you go about in a pragmatic way selling this, right? Because in general, selling software in India to Indian institutions, right, pun intended, has not been easy, right? Because nobody wants to pay for software, right? I mean, people are still trying to see who paid for Windows and Tally and so forth. So how have you succeeded at selling this? How were the early days? How is it looking now as you scale up? The other thing that you haven't mentioned yet, which I know you're very proud of, which is the number of students that engage with the Digii platform every day. So can you talk a little bit about the impact you're having on the number of students, and how does that factor into your product thinking and your sales, GTM, etc.?
Yeah. So I mean, though I would like to take the credit for some of the things, but I think what happened with us, which we didn't do consciously, but it just happened with us, is that when we started building this platform, we took a very, very first principle route to it, right? So we didn't say that, okay, look, how are HRMS done around in the world, in the other mainstream industries? How is scheduling? What existing softwares are doing? How they are doing? What we did was we kept ourselves as close as possible to our partner institutions, and we said, what are their problems? And not just what they are telling us, but what are we seeing? And our roadmap, how we are building anything, was in sort of response to what we were seeing as the problems. So the product took a very, I would say, if you ask me what was the rationale, I can put a great story to it. But there was not, the only answer was we were very close to our partners, right? And hence, whatever we were building, we could see a response to it. So for the first time when we digitized the canteen, nobody was asking for it. But every single residential university which is paying heavily for the meals of their students who are staying, when we digitize it, it improved the experience, it improved the efficiency, people saved lakhs and lakhs of rupees on it. And after that, if you look at, there are so many residential universities which will be using our platform for it, right? So the way we don't sell, which is almost opposite to how usually anybody who's dealing with education is right today. And we've also got a lot of, not from Prime, but a lot of other VC gyan on saying, nah, you need to build a bigger sales team, you need to do this, right? We believe that in this market, don't go and sell. Because anything when in education, especially we are seeing, when you're trying to sell, people look at you with suspicion, right? So what is very important is that you go, and like any large enterprise software business, that you have to take a partnership approach. You need to understand what are their top problems. Don't try to sell everything to them. Don't try to see how you can have your largest ACV, right? Look at how you can get the largest ROI for them, right? And then the partnership starts, and then the upscaling happens faster. And if you look at our NRR, it's unbelievable, right? And I remember first time when I was telling Amit our NRR, he said, check it again, right? I said, no, that's our NRR. That's what the number is. Go check it again.
Listeners, that's the net dollar-based retention. So how much revenue are you making from the same customer year on year, 2 years on the first year, and so on and so forth? It is quite astounding, the number you have.
Absolutely. And then we said, so our selling, how it's working, till today, we don't have a dedicated sales team. We don't have a single person who's only doing sales for us, right? Anybody who's managing our existing partners is the one, whenever we get an opportunity, that's the person going at selling. And that's worked beautifully for us, because I think you can put as many dollars, and this, I was reading a tweet and I don't remember where talks about the best thing that you can do in marketing is word of mouth. In enterprise SaaS especially, right? And especially when you have large ACV business, right? And that's worked out very well for us. So all these 160 plus institutions have come that way with word of mouth. And obviously we are doing our part. We are, also very visible in this space, where we are also talking about the good work we are doing. We're also celebrating our partners, how they are leveraging technology. Second is also, when you're working with the institution, you need to have, like I said, onboarding and adoption is one of the most important things in this space. So rather than trying to chase only the number of institutions, it's also important for you to look at, are they able to use it at the end of the day? Are they able to get the value out of it, right? And in this case, one of the other things that we have done is stayed close to the students, because a lot of time what happens is in enterprise SaaS, your buyer versus the user are different. And typically just to focus on sales, you stay very close to the buyer and you end up becoming very far away from the user. In our case, we have also stayed as close as possible to the user, which is largely the students. And that's what goes back to like the thousands of students. We have roughly around more than 2.5 lakh students on our platform. And we are almost 70 to 80% of them use our platform on daily basis, and the reason for that, and we get a lot of love from them. We have, in fact, we have one of our product managers today. She actually reached out to us. She wanted to work for us because she had used our product for the last 5 years. And she said, look, I love it. I love the experience. It fundamentally changed my experience at the institution, and I want to work on this product.
Yeah, in product management and in venture, we have this thing called the toothbrush test. Actually, it's attributed to Larry Page, the founder of Google. I don't know if it's true or not, or somebody has to fact check that. But basically, if you're like a toothbrush which needs to be used twice or thrice a day, then you're like mission critical, right? So I used to tell Hemant in the early days that just unplug your servers for 5 minutes and see if your phone starts buzzing off the hook, because the institution depends on it. I don't think he's ever done it yet.
No, we can't imagine even half a minute.
Right, of downtime. That means you're building something of value, and then hopefully you can monetize that value. So Hemant, as we move towards the close of the podcast, right, maybe we'll just sort of go to a little bit of your personal journey. I know you're a cook. I know you're a poet. Probably there are many other interesting things. You were an educator. I didn't know that. I learned that today. So how has your own personal journey been in terms of evolution as an entrepreneur, as a founder? What are some lessons learned? How have you learned to deal with the ups and downs of entrepreneurship? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that as you're going around building Digii.
Yeah, so I think the crux of entrepreneurial journey till now for me, and this is a beautiful share, right, which is कि कोशिश भी कर, उम्मीद भी रख, रास्ता भी चुन, उसके बाद जाकर थोड़ा मुकद्दर तलाश कर. And I feel that's like the entrepreneurial journey. You'll do what you can, you will have hope, you will also make decisions, choose your paths. But at the end of the day, a lot is dependent on the world, the destiny, right? And you need to be in the game for the love of the game, right? And outcomes will come. And we have a beautiful here the shloka, right? And the beautiful story where in Mahabharata, Draupadi asks Yudhishthira saying, right, you have lost so much for doing the right thing, and you've been deceived, you have lost your properties, you have been insulted. Why do you still do it? And it didn't take like a fraction of a second for Yudhishthira to answer it back. And the answer is very short. And the answer is, I act because I must. And stops there, right? And I think that's the dharma of an entrepreneur as well. You act because you must, because that's what you need. And so personally for me, I've in the journey, I've learned to deal with the lows, because usually only the highs come out in the public eyes, right? And only the entrepreneur knows the lows, right? And as Mark Anderson says, your highs are very high and your lows are even lower, right? So one is, how do you build the right social ecosystem around yourself? How do you build more character in yourself to deal with the lows? That's very important, I think, in one thing I've learned. Second thing is the humility, right? Because every time your high comes, you might feel like you are the god or you've arrived, right? And then you suddenly see like there's so much more, right? There is, and that's where I think there's a beautiful role the senior entrepreneurs have played in my life, where when you meet them, you see how humble they are, and in fact the challenge, and that's so. So second is the humility, saying that whatever you've done is done, but there's so much more to do. And how do you stay grounded? That's third. At the end of the day, everything is about people, right? So every time I raise a round, or every time there is a big growth, I go back and say, where are the next set of new team members that I need, right? And how do I scale up the existing guys? What do they want, right? So I think that focus, that absolute focus on people, team, their happiness, their aspirations is so much important, right? And fourth, and the last thing which I'll share in the entrepreneurial journey is that there are so many, and I say that, look, in an entrepreneurial journey, 80% of your challenges are actually more in terms of they will test your skill, competence, character, But I think 20% of the challenges are where they will challenge your character. So you fail more often because of the distractions, right? Rather than because something is tough to execute. And being able to deal with those distractions, the distractions could be that there is a large set of capital accessible to you, but you have to pivot to something that you have not thought of, right? The distractions can be in terms of, you trying to take a shortcut to business, right? There's so many ways these distractions will come to you, right? So overall, that building that character to deal with those distractions is super important. And obviously there are so many more distractions that we all know of that. So eventually these, that's important. And I think these are few things that probably in my entrepreneurial journey has given to me, and I'm very proud and very thankful for this learning opportunity.
In fact, one of my other partners, Sanjay, he has this quote that, highs are not as high as they appear and the lows are not as low as they appear. So that's an antidote to your highs and lows. I think, Hemant, you're being very humble and modest, and I know it's early in your journey. I have met some incredible entrepreneurs in my journey. I think you're one of the few people, maybe less than a handful, that remembers not just the names of everybody. I think in one of your events, you had your 7th grade class teacher come and attend, and she was seated next to me, and I'm like, so who are you and what do you do with Digii? And I'm like, no, I was Hemant's, chemistry teacher. Okay, and so why are you here?
Teacher. Yeah.
English
teacher, yes.
And why are you here? Because Hemant invited me, that he's now become an entrepreneur. I'm like, wow, okay, so and I remember in one of your other events that you had this thing where you were calling out everybody's name, their spouse's name, if they had a kid, their kid's name, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot of incredible things about you, Hemant, and really delighted to be partnering with you in this journey of building Digii, and we wish you all the best, and thanks for taking the time for the Prime Venture Partners podcast.
So thank you, Amit. Thanks for having me here, and we are also thankful for the great partnership with Prime. I think in every single way, Prime matches the aspirations, the philosophy, and every level there is a partnership with Prime, and we are very thankful for this opportunity to co-build this company with you.
Listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.